Good morning. We have the greatest hero that has ever existed, and his name is Jesus Christ. And he's the God-man. He is God who became flesh and dwelt among us. He died for us. He rose from the grave for us. He provides life for us. And he also provides us the greatest teaching ever heard in the world, recorded right in our Bible. For some of you, you're brand new to the concept of church. This may be the first one you've ever attended. And I'm glad you've given us an opportunity to worship with you and seek this God, this Jesus, the one who came and taught us who God is and who we are and how all that comes together. You see, we have a word for that. It's called spirituality. And we've been studying it all year. It's been a great journey. We've been looking at these comparisons between spirituality and religion. And now we've just really kind of transitioned, and we're just zeroing in on what this concept means to know God and to know us as ourselves as humans. We're eternal beings. We're born that way. We're spiritual beings who have a body. Eventually we're going to lose that body, but we never lose our spirit. It's who we are. And so we've really been making an effort to study that. Now, this morning, and that is studying it as Jesus taught it in the Gospel. So we're all over Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and looking at those red letters in your Bible. This morning's message that I want to share with you is really an introduction to where we're going to be all the way through, I believe, the end of September. We're going to be looking at the teachings of Jesus that really focus in on our identity, who we are as human beings, and what it means in relationship to Christ, how that transforms us in knowing Him and being in a relationship with Him. You'll hear, if you listen to preaching, some of you listen to the Black Mountain radio station, the Christian radio station comes out of there, and so if you do, you'll hear guys say, our identity in Christ, our identity in Christ. And I used to hear that all the time and never really understood what it meant. Like, okay, what does that have to do with me and life? And so we're really going to unpackage that in some ways that I think are going to surprise you in the coming weeks. As I studied Jesus' teachings, I was surprised myself as I began to see how that was applied. So to do that, we're going to introduce it in an odd way as well this morning. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 33, Jesus gives us a lesson on integrity that really is going to open the door to a deep conversation in the coming weeks on our identity in Christ and how that fleshes out in a very real way in how our lives are lived out and how we interact with others. And so listen to what Jesus says here. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 33, it says, again, and this is Jesus, again you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is His footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King, the Messiah, the one who is to come. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. Now, I've heard this translated, taught, interpreted in 5 million different ways. And so it's one of those passages that have always intrigued me. I grew up in church, been around the Bible my whole life, and it's just been one of those passages that I've always just read and thought, what is that about? Does that mean I'm not supposed to make a promise? And I've heard people say that before. And some who read the King James take it towards means you shouldn't curse, and I never figured out who decides what word's a curse word or not. I don't know if it's like a committee appointed by the government or the national something. I don't know how that works. Anyway, so I've just always been curious about this passage, and so as I kind of dove into this thing, I really began to realize it had a tremendous amount to do with our identity in Christ and integrity. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. But before I do, the meat of this message is going to be very brief, all right? I want to first give you some real clarification points on what this passage is about, because most of my life I've been confused about what he's really saying here. So I want to just share that with you first, all right? If you've got a bulletin, you can open that up. I don't know if it's in the inside or the back or wherever, but there's some notes. They'll match what's on the screen, and I want to encourage you to fill those blanks in. Men, if you're like me, you can't pay attention very well, so it's okay to cheat. You can look at the woman beside you and write down what she wrote. So it's totally cool to cheat in class today, all right? So what are these clarification points, all right? Well, the first one is this. As we read the words of Jesus, there's some real clarity we need here. Number one, When Jesus is speaking of an oath, this is what it is, all right? An oath is a promise. A promise isn't an oath, but an oath is a promise with an external guarantee. It's like an oath, it's like a promise plus, all right? So an oath is a promise with an external guarantee of the trustworthiness of the promise. The trustworthiness of the promise is the trustworthiness of what I have promised it by. So like the bank, they love me, they're glad to have my money, but they didn't necessarily trust me to pay them back. So I have to sign this thing that says if I don't pay them back, they get to have my house, right? You know how that works? When I bought back the Dodge truck I bought it back in 2002. I got it on that 0% 60-month thing. I remember those deals. And so I bought my Dodge truck in 2002, and they made me promise that for 60 months, if I didn't pay them back over the course of those 60 months, that they were going to come back and take my truck. So the truck was the promissory, all right? It was the guarantee of the loan. And the way cars devaluate, I wasn't going to work out real in their favor. Nonetheless, oath is kind of like that. An oath is when we swear by, I swear on my mother's grave, I'm telling you the truth, all right? We are putting, therefore, the trustworthiness of, my mother's not in the grave, by the way. I just want to clarify that. Anyway, so I just realized I said that and my mom's listening to it. She's like, well, you're going to tell me I'm dead now? That's not what I'm saying. So by doing that, we're saying like that this thing that I have swore by is the reason that you should understand that I'm telling you the truth, because I've swore by God, or I've swore by my dead grandmother, or I've swore by, you know, my child's life or whatever. And then we'll go, oh, okay, well, if you swore by that, it must be trustworthy. Okay? Now, second point of clarity here is just breaking this thing down. Roman numeral 2, just trying to understand this passage. There's some real important clarification points you need to make. All right? Second one, breaking an oath. I swear by my dead grandmother. All right? Breaking an oath is therefore breaking the trustworthy, the guarantee. Not necessarily of me, but of that which I have guaranteed it by. For example, if I break a promise that I swore by God, all right, then my breaking of that promise is saying that God can't be trusted. Now, we're going to unpackage this more in a little bit in our challenge and in our conclusion. But this is the point that Jesus is making here. When you swear an oath by God, and everybody has agreed to that, if you break that oath, then you're saying God is not trusted either, and no Jew would want to do that. So if you were going to swear an oath by God, there was no way you could break that. If you were going to make a contract with somebody, a business contract, some kind of arrangement, and you were going to certify that as with an oath unto God to make it trustworthy, then you certainly would not break it, because you certainly would not want to defame the name of God. So your third point of clarification comes into play here, Roman numeral 3. Why is Jesus addressing this? Well, as any good Dale Earnhardt Sr. fan knows, rules are made for loopholes, right? All you non-NASCAR people are going, what are you talking about? You see, Dale Earnhardt would take the NASCAR rules book and abide by the letter of the law and the rules. They would find the loopholes that would allow you to do this to the engine, or that to the tire, or this to the supports, or whatever, you know, and whatever they could get away with, because there was, hey, I didn't write the book. NASCAR wrote the book. We're obeying the law. So everybody goes, you're cheating, you're cheating, you're cheating. And Earnhardt said, I ain't cheating. We are following the letter of the law. It is not my fault they left a loophole in this thing. You see, our government is real good at that as well, aren't they? You know, it's kind of interesting. The people who write the law are the only ones who can defend the law. Kind of funny. Anyway, so that side note, I won't go down that road. So what we have here, because they had this law that if you swore by God, you couldn't break it, religious leaders then figured out how to get around it. And oh, by the way, most religious leaders were lawyers, so they created laws that only the lawyers could defend and determine on whether or not it was actually a real oath. Listen to this. Now, this is for your notes. Religious leaders created loopholes so they could add oaths to their promises, but still be able to break the promise without any consequence. They did this by making oaths other than by God to justify the promise was not completely binding. So I'm going to swear by Chase Grindstaff. I swear by Chase Grindstaff that I'm telling the truth here. And then you find out I really wasn't telling the truth. I said, well, you know, Chase Grindstaff's human. He makes mistakes. And so my oath could be a mistake, you know. And I just thought I'd pick on you. The guy in the red shirt, you just stood out. Don't fight me. You're big. All right, so they did this by doing that. Now listen to some commentators and what they said about this, all right? Here's what some other commentators said. It really brings out some interesting points. C.S. Keener in his commentary in speaking on Matthew 5 said this: people swore by all sorts of things other than God to testify that their word was true. They reasoned that if they broke their oath based on any of these lesser things, at least they were not bringing God's name into disrepute. It eventually became necessary for rabbis to decide which oaths were completely binding, because most of them were lawyers and that was their job. Walford and Zook said this in their commentary. They said the Pharisees were notorious for their oaths, which were made on the least provocation. Yet they made allowances for mental reservations within their oaths, kind of like crossing your fingers. If they wanted to be relieved of oaths they had made by heaven, by the earth, by Jerusalem, or by one's own head, they could argue that since God himself had not been involved in their oaths were not binding. All right, so like I said, Chase is flawed just like me. My oath was flawed, so therefore I can get out. Now, if some of you who grew up in church may have heard this passage taught that it addresses cursing and vulgarity or whatever. So just real quickly, I wanted to read you a commentary on this. I'm not going to talk about it much, but just one quote on that mistranslation of the passage. Warren Wiersbe commented on this. He said, this passage, all right, is not the sin of, quote, cursing, but the sin of using oaths to affirm that what is said is true. The Pharisees used all kinds of tricks to sidestep the truth, and oaths were among them. They would avoid using the holy name of God, but they would come close by using the city of Jerusalem, heaven, earth, or some other part of the body. I swear by my pointer finger that I'm telling the truth. And then they would justify on why they got to get out of that commitment that they made or the honesty of that statement because of the flaw of their finger, right? Now, this is where Jesus goes in this passage. All that is to set you up for this fourth point of clarification, all right? Number 4, Jesus then teaches this. He clearly taught that in God's eyes, any promise, now I want you to listen to me because we're going to bring this home in a hard and heavy way in a minute. Jesus' teachings here are this: any promise we make automatically carries with it the weight of an oath to God. Anything you and I utter as a covenanted commitment, a promise, it automatically carries the weight of God with it. No matter if we bring God into the picture, or my dead grandmother, or my left pinky finger, or the backside of my mule back there in the farm. It doesn't matter what I try to assure you with it, our word carries with it the necessary reputation of God. You go, oh, what are you talking about? I want you to listen one more time in Matthew chapter 5. Jesus said, again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, a promissory, no, not to not make a promise, but don't make a promise with an oath to try to assure it. Do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king, the coming Messiah. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say simply be yes or no, and anything more than this comes from evil. He's not saying it's wrong if you go to court and they put a Bible and put your hand on it and you swear on the Bible. He's not saying it's wrong that you do that. He's saying it's wrong if to try to earn trust. All right? I'm going to try to manipulate the situation to get you to trust me by bringing in this, I swear on my dead grandmother so that you'll believe me kind of thing. Listen to 2 different commentators on what they said on this. Whether it's by earth or whatever. Listen, Jesus says that everything by which one could swear is ultimately God's and demands that people simply be as good as their word. Simple as that. No matter what you swear by, you can't say, well, I didn't swear by God, so my oath really wasn't perfect because I didn't say it was God. I said it was Chase Grindstaff or my dead grandmother or the hair on my head, which obviously is imperfect. All right? So no matter what you pull into the equation, God created all of it. It's all God's. And no matter what you say, the reputation of God is at hand. Keener goes on. Jesus argues the point in part from scriptures. Isaiah 66:1 declared that heaven is God's throne and earth is his footstool. Most people in Jewish Palestine had black or dark hair, unless they were older, in which case their hair was turning white. Verse 36 would have been heard as referring to God's control over their aging. All right, so this whole, white or black hair, I swear by my hair, is a reference then to their aging. I swear by my age, and God's even in control of that. M.S. Mills said this: believers should never give occasion for a shadow of doubt to cross their statements, ever. Any oath sworn, no matter what you swear it by, your house, your car, your dead grandma, no matter how you swear that oath, is an oath before God and must be kept. Simple as that. For failure to do so is tantamount to denying God's existence, or at best his omnipotence and omniscience. I thought Mills put that better than anybody. So some of you are about to be shocked that I'm about to utter this word out of my mouth. I want to conclude this. You're going to be like, what? It's only 11:40. I want to conclude this. Don't get too excited. But I got two concluding statements here. The first one is very obvious, all right? When you read this passage, the first level of conclusion from the passage is really plain and simple once you understand the difference between a promise and an oath, and that what Jesus is saying is that no matter how you swear by it, it's all God's anyway, so we never have the right to break our word, period. So that is the simple conclusion. And I put it in your notes this way. Jesus teaches us in Matthew 5:33-37 that we should live our lives with such high level of integrity that our promise should have no need of an oath to assure their trustworthiness. Shouldn't need one. Like, my finances should be in such order that a bank would loan me money no matter what. They should see a pattern of financial responsibility that they don't need 18 people's signatures and 10 years of statements. They should know that I don't spend more than I make, and I'm therefore trustworthy on this note. All right? That should be my life. If I'm a business person, a person should know my reputation in my business should be so good that when I say I'm going to do a job, they know I'm going to do it, and it's going to be for the amount that I said it's going to be, and that's the end of it. That's how our integrity should be. Our yes should be able to be took as yes. Our no should be able to be took as no. That was the point Jesus is making. That's the obvious one. As soon as you can learn how to read and figure that one out. But there's a deeper point. There's a deeper point that is setting us up for where we're headed over the next few weeks. And it's this. Number two. Our lack of integrity. And when I'm done with this, I'm going to go meddle a little bit, as the old preachers say. Our lack of integrity in, no matter what it is, our lack of integrity in something is a sign of our lack of love and trust in Christ. You say, "Oh, man, just because I don't, totally fulfill my promises doesn't mean that I'm not committed to Jesus here." I'll tell you a little story. When I was 5 years old, 5 or 6, something like that. We lived in a neighborhood called Northampton, and it's in the city, and so you have real small, you have a house and a little small front yard, a little small backyard, and it's kind of like house. The kind where you can open your window and go and spit on your neighbor's window kind of thing. So house. And in the 757 Tidewater, Virginia, that's where I'm from, right? So that's kind of our neighborhood, and there was this. And looking from our house into the front yard, our neighbor that lived in this house, y'all remember the Addams family? Okay, they got that idea from this family. They were the weirdest people I've ever met in my life. They scared the daylights out of me as a kid. Man, I'm telling you what, these people were freaky. Now, somebody's going to get offended because I'm about to describe your house, all right? But these people were freaky, man. They would never cut their grass until the dogs literally could not be seen in the backyard. They had some kind, and they couldn't pick the poop up from the backyard because they couldn't see the dogs. How much are you going to see the poop? And so it just reeked. Now, some of you live out in the country, you're like, well, who scoops the poop up? When you live in the city, it's kind of one of those polite things to do for your neighbors, so we don't have to smell your dog's butt all day. You know what I'm saying? And then I don't have to deal with the flies coming off that grow out of the dog poop. That's where they put their seeds and all in my house. So it's kind of like a courteous thing that you scoop your poop from your dog, and otherwise we all have to deal with it, So they never cleaned their dogs up. It just reeked. We always had flies all over, and then their yard was all like mounted up. And apparently he had like some kind of, some kind of permit for garbage and stuff. I don't know if that's available. But like there was everything known to man laying in this man's yard. I mean, it was, as a kid, like I was half scared and half intrigued. Like, what's really in that jungle poodle over there. You know, because when you're 5, like the grass is about the same height as me. And so, you know, it looked like a jungle to me. I mean, we had the white picket fence. I used to stare through it just trying to figure out what was in it. And it was like a big dare because they had these dogs, and one of them was this hound dog that you could smell coming, and then you would hear him. You know, and it was just like, brrr, brrr. The thing was annoying. Bark all night. I wanted to shoot it in its face. You know what I'm saying? I just couldn't stand this dog. It had cats coming in the house, and the house, the gutters falling off the house. The little shutter thingies beside the windows, you know, they were falling off, and the house was just decrepit, falling apart, shingles laying everywhere. And they always had something that appeared to be a car parked in the driveway under a tarp. And amazingly, it changed different times. Like every few months, it would be a different one. None of them ever ran. None of them ever got fixed. Just miraculously, there'd be another one. It would just show up, and it'd be right there in the driveway. And now we don't know why or what it was for. It would just be there, you know. And then like it got even more interesting. So it's not like garbage everywhere and stuff everywhere and different parts and pieces and things and tall grass and dogs and the stink and the house falling apart. But they were like serious chain smokers, so like the smoke just oozed out of the house, you know, which looked like fog from the Addams Family. And so I was sure there was something weird going on. They were sacrificing animals, and they were always yelling and cussing and screaming at one another. They were getting these fights all the time. We'd be outside playing with our little Matchbox cars or our little toy soldiers, and they'd be yelling and screaming and throwing stuff and breaking mess, and then out would come one of their teenage kids and yelling, screaming, and back, and they had like the scariest car ever made. A green Pinto. Y'all remember those things? Like all the children of the 70s is going, I remember them cars, right? You could hear it coming. It came down the road, you know, backfiring. It was the nastiest, ugly look. Like if the Addams Family had a car, it should have been a green Pinto, man. It was like this scary, freaky looking, nasty, like that and the Gremlin had to be the 2 most ugly cars ever made, right? Somebody out there, they're really mad. I had a Gremlin, you know. Well, I'm glad you had it, and I hope you were happy, but you were driving Addams Family cars. So, you know, they had this car, and they would get out, and it would tear off, and it would, you know, once the car got to running, so they would floor it and tear off down the road, don't come back, fight, scream, yell, holler more, wife come out, she'd cuss back in, he'd cuss. I mean, so these people scared me. I'm 5 years old, and I'm like, you people are weird, freaky, and scary. Now, with that background, one day I'm walking over to my buddy Michael's house, and I got to go through the dark zone to get there, right? I got to pass through the demonic house. Hopefully they're not listening to my podcast. And so I got to pass through this demonic place, you know, and so I'm walking on the sidewalk, and I look over into the curb in the street, in the gutter, and I see a thermos. You know, like the kind you put soup in, and it's just laying there in the gutter. I thought, well, that's interesting. I picked the thermos up, and as I pick it up, I hear the shink. It's like shaking noise in it. Shink, 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 shink. What is that? And I could totally see my son Ari doing the same thing. I'd shake it, and I go, I'm gonna open that up. So I start trying to open it. Can't get it open. You know, I was 5. Can't get it open. Can't get it open. And then the light bulb, bing. I know what I'll do. Daddy's got a hacksaw. So I go in the garage, right? I go in our garage. Dad was down the road at a friend's house. I think he was helping fix a car or something. So I go in the garage, and I get the hacksaw out, and I sit down right at the edge of our garage in the driveway. All right, so I'm sitting there. I'll never forget it. I remember right where I was sitting, and I'm sawing away. Man, I'm sawing this thing. And about that time, I can hear the green Pinto coming. You know, and here it comes pulling in, slides in. I don't think the brakes ever worked. I think it went from off to locked, you know, and pulls in, slides into the driveway, gets out, sees me, slams the door. And y'all remember the 70s. People looked freaky in the 70s. I mean, that was apparently the in style in the 70s was look as scary, freaky, messed up as possible. So you had like this crazy hair going everywhere, you know. You'd have like the crazy beard going everywhere. Not the beards are scary, but like you'd have the crazy beard, you know, and like the gigantic, what do you call them things that would call it? Them sideburns, man, them huge ones. It would go down and be like crazy looking, you know, and crazy clothes and crazy beard and hair, just crazy. And here I am, 5 years old. Here comes this crazy man that I've heard yelling, screaming, dogs and stuff and the flies and the trash and the gutters and everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here he comes, slams the door, and he comes walking over, boom, 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 and he's dropping F-bombs all the way across the yard coming at me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this man's gonna kill me. He's crazy. He's going to feed me to that hound dog in the back, and they're going to bury me underneath that mystery garbage, and I'm dying to climb the fence to figure out where it is, but I can't see the dog and know where he is. They're going to come eat me. And so anyway, he shows up, and he comes over, and he starts cussing me out, and he's chewing me out. Who told you you could cut that thermos in half, and da-da-da-da, and who said you could do that? And I went, my dad. Where is he? He's down the road. Now, you know the whole my daddy's bigger than your daddy argument? I never got in that one. Nobody ever went there with me. My dad is actually a world record holder power lifter. All right? Now, he's in the 181-pound class, so he's not like this mammoth man, but he is incredibly strong. In 1978, he was not only incredibly strong, but he was really big. All right? So, at 65, he's a lot smaller. But in 1978, he was big and strong, and thank the Lord, nice. All right? And so anyway, with that, this man goes down the car, gets back in his Pinto, down the street he goes, find Dad. I'm sitting there going, oh boy, how's this going to end? You know? About 15 minutes later, here comes a Pinto coming back much slower. To this day, I don't know what happened, but I know the man pulled up. He was the most humble human being I've ever seen in my life. He got out of the car, went straight in the house, did not pass go, did not collect $200, didn't say a word to me, just went in the house. I thought, uh-oh, this didn't go real well. He wasn't bleeding and his eye wasn't swollen, so I didn't think Daddy hit him. But whatever Daddy said to him, apparently he went down there and said he had cussed me out, and I don't know that Dad heard anything after that, you know. And so anyway, I decided I'm just going to go in the house, act like nothing happened. And so I'm in the house, sitting in my bed, smiling, looking innocent. You know how you kids do? Here comes Dad, opens the door, shuts the door, sits down in the bed. I thought, here it comes. I'm getting my spanking. I've done lied. I'm getting my spanking. It's on. My family believed in spankings, which was a good thing with me. Dad sits down in bed. He looks at me. He said, Austin, you did something really wrong today, didn't you? I said, yes, sir. I told a lie. He said, yes, you did. You told a lie. And he said, Austin, there's never any reason why you should tell a lie. You should always tell the truth. You understand me? Yes, sir. And he went, now I'm not going to discipline you. I'm not going to spank you. I was like, oh, thank the Lord Jesus. Oh, you know, I thought, man, talk about a rock in a hard place. I was he going to get killed and buried in the backyard and beat by my dad, you know? And I said, okay. He looked at me. He said, I know why you didn't tell the truth. I said, you do? He said, I do. He said, you were scared. And therein lies what I'm making a point this morning. You see, to tell the truth requires courage. My dad looked at me. He said, I know you were scared and you couldn't tell the truth. You were scared of what that man was going to do to you. And for a 5-year-old, that's understandable, right? But he made sure he understood that even though I was 5, I needed to grow up and find the courage that was necessary to always tell the truth. You see, telling the truth requires courage. It requires courage to face the consequences of the truth. It requires courage to be willing to fulfill a commitment. It requires courage. Where does courage come from? Well, religiously, it would come from discipline and self-inflicted consequences. But Jesus taught courage coming from a very different place. And this is where we're going to go in the coming weeks, so I don't need to spend a lot of time on this. Jesus taught us that courage is a fruit of knowing Him. Courage is something that explodes out of us when we have such confidence that He is our God, that life is eternal, that everything in this world is in no comparison to everything in His, that He holds me in His hands and nothing can separate me from the love of God. Courage is a root, and knowing one day I will stand before a holy and mighty God, and I will have to give an account, and He knows all things, but His grace is sufficient even in that. Courage is a product of our relationship with Jesus, and courage brings the confidence that you and I have to live out the gospel into this world. It's what we have to love our enemies. It's what we have to truly be humble. You'll find that out next week. It's what we have to be able to engage life's difficulties and problems. It's all rooted in our understanding and our love and our passion and our commitment to Christ. When we love God and we're overwhelmed with His love for us, there is a byproduct called courage that naturally comes from that, and courage always leads to truth. If you got a truth problem, you got a courage problem, and if you got a courage problem, you got a problem in knowing Jesus. It calls into question everything you believe about God, heaven, hell, and life if you've got a truth problem. So with that, I want to do a little meddling and we're going to be done this morning. by meddling, that means I got a few challenge questions I want you to think about. Number one, concerning what you do to earn income, your job. Are you performing what you committed to do? If you're a business owner and you feel the necessity when you make a deal with somebody to tell them you're a Christian and you go to church, buddy, there's your flag. If you got to tell me you're a Christian to get me to trust you, then your business has already got a problem. Amen? Too many people are running around using Christian to manipulate deals and get people to trust. If you would just be trustworthy, you'd take care of yourself. It's kind of like why we don't call it Venture Church. Now legally, we're Venture Church Inc. But publicly, we're just Venture. The reason is, if I got to tell somebody we're a church, we have failed miserably. I don't introduce myself as Austin Ramo Human. I'm kind of hoping you'll figure human out. Right? If I got to tell you I'm human, now some of you might be, I don't know, you might be a Martian, I'm not really sure. You know, I heard they were exploring Mars. You kind of look like you could be an alien, you know. If I got to tell somebody we're a church, we failed. Totally. So it's kind of like a challenge. Not a right or wrong, just a challenge. But the same is true about our oaths that we take. When you signed up to work for Freightliner or Belk or the military or whatever business you work for or whatever business you own that you're making contracts with anybody else. When you did that, you were swearing an oath. You were saying, I'm going to work for you and I'm going to perform this duty. And the moment you don't do that, by default, according to what Jesus just taught, by default, you are necessarily preaching that God is not trustworthy. So you go to Freightliner, and you've made this agreement at Freightliner to do this task this many days a week and this many hours a year, and they're going to pay you this much money as long as you do that task and perform it. The moment you stop doing that and yet run around and invite people to church and talk about Jesus and how much you love God, how faithful you are to Him, basically what you're saying is you're talking out of your butt. Everybody at your job thinks everything you say is full of you know what. Right? Because your word is who you are. Am I on it? Okay, I just want to make sure because it got real quiet. Well, I'm going to call in sick when I'm not really sick. That's your word. You swore an oath. You made a commitment to accomplish a task. And so every little shortcut you take, every time you don't do what it is you said you were going to do, at the level that you said you were going to do it, with integrity, you are saying to that person, don't trust God. That's what Jesus said. Question number 2. Concerning your commitment to Christ, then, how does the use of your time, your talent, and your treasure reflect the integrity of that decision? Remember the rich young ruler that came to Jesus? What must I do to go to heaven? Jesus said, have you obeyed all the law? Yep, I have. Okay, sell all you have and follow me. Can't do that. You see, this rich young ruler considered himself to be a man who had trusted God with his life, yet when God is standing in front of him and says, here's what I want you to do with what you've trusted me with, he says no. And Jesus didn't go, okay, well, I'll compromise with you. He just said no. See, some of you have this incredible talents that are so needed in the body. And you made a commitment to Jesus, thus making you a part of His church. Then you made a commitment to be a part of His church in this local body. All right, we're just a local assembly of His church, the big church. All right, we're not the church, we're a part of the church. Amen? So you made a commitment to God. If you're going to be in His big church, you got to be serving in it somewhere. And yet you don't use your talents for nothing. You don't prioritize your talents to be used of God. You don't prioritize your time. Now listen, I'm going to just be honest. As a church, we've not done a good job of giving you opportunity. I've spent most of this year trying to change that. We've made some good headway. I feel like we're on the right path, and we're going to continue to improve. And that is going to happen. All right? So we're doing a better job each passing week of giving you those opportunities. But at the end of the day, you committed your life to Christ. You said you wanted to serve. Now serve. God's given you talents and gifts. He's given you time. The average American, and I'm not just talking about in some way in the church, the average American Christian don't even know his own neighbor. They don't know who he is. Your primary call in the kingdom of God isn't even in this church. It's as an ambassador of Christ to bring the gospel to the world around you. And yet most Christians don't even know their own neighbors. You can't tell me you don't, if you can't prioritize the time to meet a neighbor, my gosh, you got no hope, man. Like seriously. So we make a commitment to Jesus. Yes, Lord, here's my life. I'll follow you. Okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to love your neighbor. Not going to do that. He's a butthole. I've said that word twice now. If you're offended, you have one, So anyway, I'm sorry. That just did it twice. That's like taking salt and just rubbing it in the room with gasoline, isn't it? All right, so we got to know when I'm going to do that. Oh, and this one, we love this one. We love this one. This one we love. God, here's my life. Okay, I want you to give financially to your church, other things around you. No, I'm not going to do that. See, most of you don't give to anything. Now, I don't say I know you. I'm just saying statistically, most of you don't give anything. I will say we recently ran a report. I didn't see the names. I didn't see the names at all. All right, so I didn't look in to see who's giving what. But they ran a report of how many families are giving in our church. And you don't have to go through very many names before you get to zeros on the rest of the list. And I'm just saying, you believe in a vision, you made a commitment. Are you committed or not? Ooh, I hear the cricket now. Cricket's going, anybody listening? Because I'm feeling nervous. Your time, your talent. We're not being, I give you my life, but I'm not committed to the church. I'm not going to that life group. Listen, I can't get up earlier and be a part of a group or go to somebody's. I don't have time. Really? As a church, we've made being involved as far as time goes as easy as it can get. We say, man, come to worship once a week and get involved in a life group once a week. The average church wants you there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all day Monday, right? We're just like, look, we know life is crazy, but we need to be committed to one another. When we committed to Christ, we committed to His church. If you feel this is where that should be lived out, then you need to be committed here. You can't say you're committed to His church and not committed to a church locally. That's an impossibility. So if you feel like God's leading you here, then get committed. Because guess what? It's your word with Him that's in question. Not with me, not with Venture, with Him. And you got to give an account for that. Well, how busy should I be? I ain't saying. That's between you and the Lord. How much am I supposed to give? Between you and the Lord. You deal with that. I trust God in your life on that end. I do know the Bible teaches very clearly the tithe belongs to Him. The tithe is 10%. And so I understand that God gives me a paycheck and 10% of that He gave me to give to Him. It's kind of like we do with our kids. Here's $1 you can put in the offering plate. That's what God does with my paycheck. And if you don't think your money comes from God, watch what happens in the next economic downturn. Third challenge is this. It's the last point. We're going to be done before everybody runs out and starts throwing hymnals at me. That's why we don't put hymnals out there. So when you get mad, you got nothing to throw. We put the words on the screen so you don't even have a big, gigantic Bible to hit me with. Number 3. Concerning your spouse and children, and this is really where it hit home to me major. Concerning your spouse and children. Are you loving and honoring them as you committed? As I really prayed through this passage and asked God, okay, Lord, where are the issues in my life where I lack integrity? Where my yes is not yes and my no is not no. And He revealed to me some things and I've had to address those. But one of those was in this area right here. As I really prayed it through, God kept bringing me back to my family. Over the last year, I've probably spent more time. This October will be my 10th anniversary pastoring this church. But in this last 12 months, maybe 12 to 16 months, I've probably spent more time than ever before laboring for things related to this church. Consequently, that means a lot less time with my wife and kids. So here's what happens, guys. We say to our wife, I love you. But then there's no evidence of it. And so we make a promise. Honey, I'm going to take you on a date. I know we didn't get to do it this week, but we'll do it next week. And the next week comes and it passes. Honey, I know we didn't get to do it this week, but we'll do it the next week. And then it comes and it passes. Listen, honey, I know it didn't happen this month, but I promise next month we'll take some time just for us. And then that month passes. We do the same thing with our kids. Some of you have promised your kid, I'll be at the game, and you don't show up. I'll be at the practice, you don't show up. I'll be here, I'll be there, and you don't show up. And listen, a lot of times, and it's unavoidable sometimes. I mean, I can't help that there was a car wreck and I got stuck on the interstate while a helicopter landed on it. You know, nothing I can do about that one. But I had a massively convicting moment a few weeks back. It was really interesting. It's probably about 3 weeks ago now. I'd already studied and got this message ready. And then it kind of happened afterwards, and I really thought back to what I had just studied and been convicted about. Every year, I used to travel and preach for a living, and so when I started pastoring the church, I decided I used to do 10 camps a summer. I'd go all over the country preaching in youth camps. And so once I started pastoring the church, I decided I'll only do one. Whoever calls first, that's where I'll go. And so for the last about 5 years, it's a little camp in Virginia that I used to work at when I was in college. They asked me every year to come speak, and they always call before anybody else, so I always go there. And so last year, I took Ari with me, just us, and we kind of had a boys' week while I was at the camp, and he loved it, just loved it. We did all kind of, boy stuff, in the room. We'd have farting contests and stuff like that, and boy stuff. And so we go shoot. Like my son, he can't aim real good, but he can squeeze it, man. I got a 9mm little Glock 26, and he will absolutely empty the magazine. Blah, 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 blah. There's no telling where it's going to go. If you break into my house, you may or may not get shot, but you're going to be scared to death, all right? Because he knows how to put the clip in, he knows how to cock it, he can do the whole shooting match, and then he just starts wearing it out. And I kind of hold on to it so not to, go completely crazy, but he's like, blah, 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 blah. Bullets flying everywhere, landing on our heads, awesome, So we took one day, we went shooting, and one day we went to the movies. And so I'd always try to take time each day at camp to just spend 3-4 hours just us. And so we went into Lynchburg, it's the closest town near this little camp, to watch Spider-Man. And he was so excited. We're going to watch Spider-Man, and there was one of those jumpy house places right beside it, kind of like we have in Gastonia. And I said, look, we'll go watch Spider-Man, and then we'll go to the jumpy house. And it happened to be on the Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day, so there was nobody there. Everybody was at Chick-fil-A. I believe people came here from Europe just to go to Chick-fil-A that day. I've never seen so many people in my life, So anyway, the place was empty. We were the only two people in the theater. I told Ari that they had reserved it just for us. I know it's a lie, but it was fun. So, and this is a message on integrity, so that's a confession. But anyway, so there we are, and we're watching the movie, it's just us and the whole theater. It was really cool. And then we get up and we go over to the jumpy house, and there was a handful of moms there. It was in the middle of the day, so there's a handful of moms there with their kids. And I'm the only man there with his son. So I go in, and me and Ari, we're playing, we're bouncing in the bouncy house. And they had one that had basketball goals in it. So I was picking up and throwing them, and he was like, bam, and he'd dunk the ball and hit the thing and bounce up. And I pick him up again. Well, all the boys in the bouncy house place and all the other places are seeing this. Like, oh, cool, a grown-up having fun with a kid. I can't wait. So next thing I know, there's like a dozen strange kids in this bouncy with us, and I'm throwing all of them. I'm kind of stupid that way, Holly Williams, our children's director, just freaks out, every time I start hanging out with the kids, like, oh gosh, he's gonna hurt one. So I'm throwing them, kids like, they're getting busted lips and everything. It's awesome. Parents are over there just jawing away. They have no idea what's going on, And all in the middle of all this, my son, if you know my son, he loves playing with other kids, just loves it, man. He just can't wait. There's some guys, some boys over playing. He will absolutely kill himself to get over there so he can go play and do games and do all that kind of stuff. Just loves playing, loves having fun. So I thought he was having fun. Until he comes over and he tugs on my pants leg, and he looks up and his eyes are watered up. And I said, what's wrong? I thought, I'd maybe throwing him into something and he got hit with an elbow or something. I said, what's wrong? He said, Daddy, I thought today was just going to be me and you. You see, I lost integrity with my son. And so we lied again. We told all the kids we were going to play hide and go seek. We told them to hide, and we didn't go seek. They wouldn't go away. We did everything we could to get away from these kids, and they kept following us, so we finally decided we had another plan. And I was like, no, this is a lie, and don't do this, but it's for a good cause. Read Rahab, Bible story. And all right, anyway, so it was justifiable cause. It was really funny. You could see kids keep looking up, wondering when we're going to come find them. But remember what I said earlier, what Jesus taught us was that every oath we make is an oath unto God. And therefore, every oath that we break, every promise, whether it's an oath or not, whether we bring God into it or not, every promise we make is a promise to God. And it's seen that way by everybody. Your promise with your business, working for so-and-so, to the Lord, obviously, no matter what it is, our promises are always one unto God, no matter if we bring him into it or not. So guess what? To my son, my promise to love him and my words to love him and my promises that we're going to spend time together and we're going to do fun things together, no matter if I mention God or not to him, he is going to measure my word and my commitment to love him and be a part of his life to God's willingness to love him and be a part of his life. And if I don't fulfill my end as a dad, it will necessarily reduce his understanding of God, because that's the way God designed the universe. It's the way God made us. Our commitments to one another are always a commitment before the Lord. And as believers in Jesus, they always carry that weight. So no matter if it's your son, your daughter, your wife, your husband, your employer, your customers, no matter who it is, your word is the greatest testimony of the love of God to the entire world that will ever be given. So it is vitally important that we have the courage that is found in an identity secured in Jesus. Lord Jesus, I pray that we can think honestly through this.